What's going on, guys? Coach Gaglione here. This is another edition of the Powerlifting for People podcast. I'm your host, Coach Gaglione. I've been involved with powerlifting and strength coaching for over 15 years. Got a really cool interview here today. We got a father and son, and we got a ripped, jacked neurosurgeon, which I'm really excited about. So we'll just kind of dive right in. But if you guys want, and again, we can kind of go one at a time. You guys can go back and forth, just to kind of, so the audio doesn't cut out. If you guys could give a quick intro who you are and what you got going on right now.
Sure, Ellis, go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Ellis Osborne. As probably noted, I'm the young guy, 20 years old, currently a college student, and have been competing in powerlifting for like 4 years now. Done
Nice.
2 USPA competitions and a USAPL in college. But yeah, as kind of aforementioned maybe by my dad, is we're pretty good at deadlift because of our leverages, but everything else suffers a little bit.
And then where do you go to school?
I go to UPenn.
Oh, cool. So we're based out of New York, and I'm actually in the process of moving to Delaware, so not too far away. So we actually one of my guys, Robert Ing, I think he's since graduated, but he wrestled there. But anyway,
yeah,
really cool. So, and then how about yourself?
So my name is Brett Osborne. I am a neurosurgeon based out of West Palm Beach, Florida, and I'm currently the section chief of a level 1 trauma center here known as St. Mary's. I also have a longevity medicine practice, and as Ellis had mentioned, we've been powerlifting together for the past probably 8 or 10 years. Ellis started competing 4 years ago and myself probably, I don't know, Ellis, what would you say, about 7 or 8 years ago was when I did my first competition, but I've been a lifetime lifter. I started lifting weights when I was 10. And that's another interesting story about how, sort of how everything has evolved. I've been through, all sorts of training modalities. Ellis, as you can see, is sitting in, or actually it's a faux background of my high intensity facility that's actually based in our West Palm Beach office, and that's longevity medicine practice. But I don't use that facility much. I've been through Jones style training. I actually trained that way for probably about 15 years of my life. But as of the past, I would say maybe about 15 years ago, I've been basically exclusively dedicated to powerlifting as sort of the primary modality.
I definitely want to touch back on the HIIT training, because I think that
Sure.
So just remind me if we don't get to it, because I think that's like kind of a forgotten thing for people that are probably, I don't know, younger than 35, younger than 40.
That's right.
So I think it's good to know the history, and I think it's cool that you guys are just, so I think that's kind of important. So I kind of joke, because I did my first meet back in 2006. So a little bit older than your, I guess your son got started when he was 16. So and when I was lifting, I was lifting against open guys, masters. Now there's like the kids have exploded. The teenage and the juniors and what they're doing is absolutely incredible. So I kind of joke that I started doing it before it was cool, but it's really cool to see. I say the weights don't discriminate. You got guys in their 50s and 60s and 70s. You got guys like David Ricks and like the USAPL that are still like hitting monster numbers, and you have guys that are, man, in their teenage years that are doing like just incredible things in the women. So yeah,
David Ricks trains at our gym.
there you go. Small world. It's a small.
Yep.
It's I mean, I'm sure it's like amazing, even though you know him, it's like amazing every time. It's just like but it kind of goes to show you that if you put in the work, you stay healthy. Powerlifting is one of those things, and that's why this is called Powerlifting for the People, because I think a lot of people, there is a lot of myths, and I'm sure we'll kind of touch on those. And is it safe? Is it healthy? Like, can you do it like sustainably over time? My fiance, or her daughter, just did a meet. She's 8 years old.
Good for her.
Amazing. So, and she had a blast. We had 3 girls that were under 12 that all competed together. And, did they go like crazy? No, but they were learning the lifts. They're having fun. They're learning a lifelong skill. So I love, like, so we can go on and on, but so let's get back to your son a little bit. So I'm sure, obviously, you saw your dad kind of, partake into the weight training. How did you kind of first stumble across lifting, and Did he kind of push you? Did you kind of ask him? Like, how did that kind of like first happen?
Okay. So I guess the story all begins like in the beatdown garage that we have. Actually the garage is fine. It's just like the atmosphere that we've curated in there. Another guy who we still train with, I mean, he's been training with my dad for like a decade, as aforementioned, but they would be in there hitting 20 rep squats with like 315. And I would sit in the corner and like do homework after school. And it was just like the constant reiteration of the importance of lifting and stuff. So I guess it was kind of ingrained before I even had like a voluntary response and saying, "Oh, I want to do this." Um, but yeah, I actually started lifting to complement like other sports that I was doing. I was like a pretty competitive water skier and played like lacrosse. Um, but in high school they had Olympic lifting, so I tried it. Wasn't a huge fan and realized that, well, I have a pretty good coach, so why not just start powerlifting? Um, that's kind of how things went. And we upgraded to a more beat down dungeon of a gym. And it's awesome. We train 3 times a week. We do like conjugate. Um, and ever since I've been hooked. I don't think there's been any like external pressure sometimes. Or sometimes there's like, as at this point, getting like a little bit older, I'm like, okay, I don't want my joints to be screwed up. What do I have to do to be preventative so I'm not crippled at 50? Um,
I just want to pause for a second because a couple of things I want to highlight. You said that you train 3 times a week on average, or
yeah, I train at school 4 times because I do
three
full
to four.
conjugate, but I
Cool.
think we train 3.
And I definitely want to touch on what conjugate means to you guys, because I think that's also, and I'm sure your dad can speak of this because he's been around. Um, when I first started lifting, like Westside Barbell was in its heyday. I got a fortunate opportunity to train under Louis Simmons for a little bit. I kind of visited there a couple of times, did some interning over there, and it's kind of gone in waves, like the HIT and all this stuff. Like things kind of swing back and forth. But I know, like recently, a lot of people your age would kind of poo-poo like those. It's not as popular for the, like your like age demographics. I thought that was very interesting. So I definitely want to maybe touch on that, and maybe I'd love to hear your dad's take on maybe why he kind of favors that system or not, because it's not quite as popular for whatever reason. It's very specific, very frequent training. I see a lot of people like benching 4 or 5 times a week with the straight bar, with the competition lift. So thought that was really interesting. So I definitely want to kind of touch on that. And then
My
and
shoulder just broke off just thinking about that, by the way.
well, yes, that's again. So again, not to we're getting there, but it's nice. It's nice. It's refreshing hearing someone your age be open to the ideas. Obviously, you had some good people like working with you, and not to like toot my own horn, but I've been competing since 2006. I'm still making progress. I'm 17 plus years of competing. That's not on top of barbell training. And knock on wood, I haven't been under the knife. I've been relatively, we get dings and stuff, right? Which we'll talk about, but I do kind of attribute a lot of that to the training style that we use, and we also use a lot of conjugate principles. But anyways, so I'd love to kind of hear that from your dad once we kind of get into the programming side of things. But before we don't want to jump too far ahead, so I want to kind of hear about your dad's story a little bit in terms of, we don't need to go back from the very beginning, but maybe in terms of like what kind of made you transition to, okay, I love lifting weights. Like, when did you kind of decide you actually wanted to enter a competition? Was there like a moment? Was it something that maybe you always, thought of doing, or was there something that you could remember, like, okay, this happened, and then, I kind of signed up for my first meet?
So it wasn't some sort of discrete event. My longevity medicine practice is very, very performance based. Okay, so whether it's performance biochemically, in other words, trying to access your health by bettering your biochemistry, or meeting goals in the gym, whatever it happens to be. And oftentimes it's both for myself and for the majority of my patients. Powerlifting was a way, and particularly competitive powerlifting was a way that I can sort of assess my abilities yearly, twice yearly, depending upon the frequency of our meets. Right now, I'm thinking that I'm probably going to be, doing competitions yearly, as opposed to even considering twice twice weekly. I was talking to Kayla Woolam, who's my deadlift coach, about this just the other day. And, we were talking maybe every 9 months versus doing it every 6 months versus doing it every year. I'm probably gravitating towards doing it yearly. But as a circuitous answer to your question, it's a way that I can sort of measure my performance physically and also measure my performance mentally. I ride motorcycles. People say, well, why do you ride motorcycles? That's ridiculous. You're a neurosurgeon. And one of the reasons why I ride motorcycles, which is, it may sound extremely paradoxical, to you, it's not because motorcycles are fun. Yeah, I like going fast. I like doing things like this. I've been riding for motorcycles for 15, 16, 17 years, whatever it is now. It's because they are a good way to see how my brain is functioning. Yeah, you could say, well, neurosurgery sort of does that. Nah, you've done neurosurgery for 25 years. It does that less and less. But that's one of the reasons why I do trauma almost exclusively. It's because every time I get in there in the middle of the night at 2 o'clock in the morning, there's a puzzle. There's somebody that has a bullet in their brain or in their spine or wherever it is. And it's some way that I can do some sort of self-assessment. So powerlifting has been like that for me. And the evolution, real quick, has been classic Arthur Jones HIIT training. So HIT, not HIIT, as I'm sure you know, is what has been adopted nowadays, which is different, than classic Arthur Jones style HIIT training. I migrated over to a standard sort of 5x5, so we'll call it the Wendler 5x5. I was doing that for quite a while, and then I sort of migrated into, whatever you want to call it, West Side, conjugate training, as competition and preparing for competitions, sort of came to the forefront. So I know that was a circuitous answer, but that's sort of how I got to competing in powerlifting. And quite frankly, I'm glad that I did, because whether it's HIIT training or whether it's, it's doing something that's 5x5 type training, nothing really prepares you for everyday life. And I don't want to use the word functional because that has very, very bad connotations. And I'm not in there. I'm not into swinging golf clubs with 100 pounds at the back end of the golf club, okay, to make you a better golfer. We know that doesn't work. Training is sport specific. So I don't believe in any functional training at all. But powerlifting is functional training. Why? Particularly with things like deadlifting, right? If your wife asks you, or your fiance in your case, coach, asks you to go and pick up a clay pot outside that's sitting on the outside of a pool and it happens to be 200 pounds, you're going to know how to do that. Why? Because you know how to deadlift. So if you're talking about something that is going to protect your back lifelong and make you stronger, right? It would be learn the proper technique of a deadlift, right? And that is a critical movement. I would say that by far that is the most functional of all, the powerlift of the 3 powerlifting movements. You may disagree, but again, I'm a neurosurgeon, and I can tell you for sure that as a near 600-pound deadlifter, and you probably echo, my sentiments here. I'm sure Ellis does as well. He's almost a 600-pound deadlifter, even though he's 25 pounds lighter than me. We have no back pain. How's that possible? Deadlifting is bad for your back. Squatting is bad for your back. It is. The neurosurgeon says that it's not. Right? As a matter of fact, the people that have back pain, those are the people that should be deadlifting and squatting. And I tell my patients that. So powerlifting has given me, sort of that, the structure, the competitive structure. It fulfills me from a competitive standpoint. It also allows me to remain extremely functional.
I want to highlight a couple of things. There was a lot of like gem talking points there. So I want to highlight what I heard. And so number one, I totally agree with you with the competition part. Like it gives you like a measurable like thing that you can kind of like, so like for me, I've competed in a bunch of different weight classes. So while maybe not every competition I enter is like an absolute PR, maybe my Wilks or my DOT score goes up. Maybe I PR in this weight class. Maybe I PR a particular lift. I hit certain number of times the body weight. But have it kind of working towards a goal. And like you mentioned about like problem solving. And I think that's like really important, because I think a lot of people like now, at least from what I've seen, again, not everyone, they like want the quick fix. They want the answer right away. They want this instant gratification. So like learning to, like you said, I'm going to train for a meet for a year and wait a year. That's like, Oh my gosh, and I kind of agree with you. I'm kind of like competing once or twice a year now. I'm kind of slowing down a little bit. I've kind of noticed that even twice a year to like really peak and really, you need some time to build. So, and I think that kind of is a good lesson for life too. You can't just have the dream job, the dream house. You got to save money. You got to like set things up. And so you got to like have these blocks of training that lead into that peaking phase. Just like in life, like you can't just snap your fingers and have your dream home, your wedding, all this stuff. It takes time and it takes preparation. And I think powerlifting really teaches you to do that. It teaches you to prepare for, 12 weeks, 16 weeks, 20 weeks with an off season, with an in season, with a peak. So I loved what all you said. And I think I think it trains you physically and mentally. And a lot of people just don't connect the dots and aren't able to transfer those skills to other areas. But if they did, I know that's why I've been successful in business. I'm sure you guys as well. He's probably your son's probably, it's a great school he got into. It's like not by like accident, right? Because he has these skills he's able to transfer to other areas. And the other thing that you said about like what's functional. Yeah, I totally agree. I think a lot of people think that you need, you practice your sports skill and you get strong in the weight room. And that's kind of like my sentiment too. And I think, powerlifting does those learning to brace, learning to kind of pick things up off the ground. I always say too, from like a functional standpoint, like you got to be able to get off the toilet. You got to be able to get off a chair. So now you may not need to do that with 800 pounds, but the act of squatting is important. The act of picking things up off the ground is important. And being able to do it properly and having the load capacity to do so. So I think all those things, like I said, I couldn't agree more. And I actually had it's unfortunate. I had a person that he was looking to do a consult with me and ended up kind of canceling. And he's kind of was adamant he wanted to kind of just only train for aesthetics. And he's like, I don't want to do any powerlifting. I don't want to do any powerlifting. And I'm like, okay, that's fine, but just realize that if you like learn these movements and you learn these skills and you learn how to brace and you learn how to hinge and you learn how to squat, like those things can transfer over to whatever activity and some people kind of get it. They think they need some like special, like gimmicky thing. So, but oftentimes it's the basics over time that really win. So, I did want to kind of touch on some of the programming stuff a little bit. And in particular, I'd love to kind of hear about, you're very educated. You guys are both very educated. You have you talked about like kind of joint integrity and longevity and stuff. You guys are different ages, but you're still concerned with joint health. So with the kind of program you're doing now, what are some things, in addition to like the longer off seasons, maybe competing a little bit less frequently, what are some things that you guys have found helpful to continue to make progress, but still like maintain healthy joints and, I guess not taking performance too far where it's at a detriment to like, whether it be your physical health, your joint health, or anything like that.
Sure. Ellis, I'll piggyback. You can talk, okay, and then I'll piggyback as the more sort of senior person, with creaky joints.
Sure. Okay, so I guess this is an interesting perspective because I've kind of just followed what literature and stuff has said, and also listening to my dad. My grandpa was a chiropractor, but I think the key for injury prevention, as is very much documented, is just like preventative strategies. So before the meets and stuff, I mean, this is very local in terms of time, but we got massages. We went to the tanks, the isolation tanks,
The sensory deprivation tanks.
on a daily basis, it's very much using like the massage guns, the infrared sauna, the laser locally on like my knees and stuff, and just stretching pretty, again, proactively before all of the lifts, whether it's bench squat or deadlift, and taking supplements that I don't know if they're marginal or they're making a big difference, whether it's psychological, placebo, whatever, or actually doing stuff. I've started taking like collagen, and I think it's been helping me quite a bit. We also take like MSM, glucosamine, and just vitamin C, fish oil, and now we're all into proline lysine. I don't know if it's actually doing anything, but I think it does. And it's kind of the echoed reverberations from a lot of the literature that has been thankfully passed down, and it is currently sitting on my desk in my room for me to read from my dad. And I have no pain at all. So
in addition, before your dad goes, so number one, like you're paying attention to recovery. You're paying attention to what you put in your body. You're paying attention to doing things that help you relax.
Yeah.
And I'm sure your dad can talk about like how that can affect your nervous system and what that does, the response that kind of does. Because I think a lot of people will say like people get really wrapped up with like the tool, but it's like what is the tool like doing for like the individual? I think is important. So I think that's great. Anything in particular in terms of like how you train? So I kind of and you may be like in this nice echo chamber and you may not have like been exposed to like a lot of maybe what I would consider less optimal training for like longevity because of which is great. But in terms of maybe like some things that you're doing, like maybe how often you're deloading, what your exercise selection is, how you manipulate your volume or auto regulate fatigue, how do you like kind of peak for, you know, anything like off the top of your head that you kind of find is helpful for like keeping your joints healthy, or maybe you're just really mindful of like, I'm going to make sure my technique doesn't break down. I'm just kind of throwing examples out, but like anything
Yeah.
off the top of your head.
Well, I did Texas for a USAPL meet, and I would say I was very destroyed. Like every day, I would be taking naps and sleeping like 12
So
hours.
for really quick for people that are listening, so just quick rundown of like what the Texas method is, like the frequency of it, because some people may not be familiar with that
Okay.
program.
It's
It's
3 days
a
a week.
nightmare, basically. You're asking Ellis to
Yeah,
recall
it's 3 days a
nightmare.
week. It's a 5x5 squat, which you increase every week, and then it's a 5x5 bench, I think, and then it's a full meet on Friday.
So
Every Friday.
little higher frequency, linear progression, and they had like a volume day, an intensity day, a lighter day. So it's a pretty high workload and a pretty high frequency. So so go on.
But yeah, me and my buddy were sitting in the gym for like 3 hours on Friday, which is the mock meet, and I was dying, honestly. Like, the intensity was too much for me. But I think if you're working or in school, it's just not feasible, and unless you're on like major drugs or you have the capacity to
Yeah.
recover maniac, it's very hard.
So
But I've switched to like a conjugate with mesocycles where it just makes sense.
and how so you went from like on the high end, higher frequency, you were in the gym for a long time, 3+ hours, and you're like workout. How long do your workouts like last now on like average? Obviously, like when you're going really heavy, I know it could vary, of course, but like would you say on average, what would a session last for you?
I think if it's a max effort day, it requires a lot of warm up. So that can be like 2 hours, but normally a workout session, we can squeeze it in with full accessories in an hour and a half.
Yeah. I like to keep ours to 60 to 90 minutes. And then again, for our bigger guys, like if you're squatting like 600, 700, it might take 2 hours, even if you're moving pretty good. So, but I think also too, like your workload, and then your dad, I'm sure, is a lot different where you're probably not doing as many barbell lifts. I don't want to speak for you, but not on that type of program. Maybe the barbell lifts are a little bit less, but maybe you're doing more auxiliary, injury prevention, accessory type work. So maybe you can kind of speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. Sorry to keep stealing the mic, but yeah, my medial side of my knee has been a little bit achy. So after this meet, I took some time, and I'm still in the process of recovering it, to rehab it, and it's gone away. So I'm happy about that. But kind of just to go back on one thing, I do want to say, like, the first answer to the question, those are things that supplement after like good sleep and nutrition. Like, they don't matter if those things.
Yeah, good point. Very good point.
That's exactly what I was going to. That's exactly what I was going to say. As far as injury prevention is concerned, sleep and nutrition are they are oftentimes taken for granted. The thing about it is that most people are not adequately sleeping. They're not getting adequate rest. They're not eating properly. Certainly, their protein loads are probably not being met, or they're eating junk. So those things are critical. They can't be understated. And those things are most often, I would say, flawed, secondary to the next thing, which is a big thing on the list, and Ellis had touched upon it, which is technique. One of the reasons why Ellis is a humble kid, okay? Ellis barefooted, we're barefoot water skiers. Well, he really is. I taught him, I gave him his feet, but he skied on the United States barefooting team, which is basically like at the Olympic level, which is one of the reasons why he got into powerlifting, to supplement his skiing, and it worked wonders for him. And his skiing got better very, very quickly after he developed the balance, stability, and the strength in the lower body and the posterior chain, the pelvic musculature, and the lumbar erectors and the abdominal wall. Period. So, you know, he's meticulous with regard to that, his technique, and learning those skills, and they are quite difficult. And he's translated that, and this is sort of pervades his entire existence, into highly technical powerlifting. One of the reasons why he does not get hurt, and one of the reasons why people do get hurt, one of the big reasons, in addition to lack of sleep and bad nutrition, and those two things go hand in hand, is because their technique sucks. Okay, and they may think that they know how to squat because they learned at LA Fitness how to squat, but they have no idea, as you had alluded to, how to hinge, how to sit back into the squat, how to lead the squat with the, with the butt. What you see people doing is driving their knees forward, as you know, and sort of just literally squatting down instead of pushing their butt back first and trying to get their shins vertical at the bottom. If you don't understand that one concept, and that is not drilled into your head, you can forget it. You're going to end up with back pain, knee pain, and it's going to be a horrible existence for you. But we started him, again, probably 5, 6, 7 years ago, when he was doing the, I'll call it the sort of pseudo powerlifting, Olympic lifting, weird hybrid in high school, teaching him these techniques, starting out from literally standing up off of a box, which is a critical skill unto itself that most people have no idea how to do. I take people in our facility here, and I say, I want to see you sit down on the box and do a proper squat. I would say 95% of them have it wrong. So drilling into the technique and making sure your technique is as perfect as it can be, and nobody's going to be perfect, is critical. And that goes with all 3 lifts, obviously, and really anything that you do, whether it's deadlifting or lifting a sandbag. You have to understand the mechanics. Understanding is a huge, huge component of not getting injured. If you want to exist in this sport lifelong, you must pay meticulous attention to your technique. I always say that the guys at the master level, like me, I win by attrition, because everybody else gets injured, okay, because they've done something, they're technically flawed, and they wash out. But if you're really, really careful and you are meticulous about your technique, and that includes the lifts, that includes the warm-up, which for me is 30 minutes on the clock. For Ellis, it's a little bit different. He can warm up a little bit faster. His joints aren't as creaky as mine. His vascular tree is more robust than mine. His blood supply to his joints, he can warm his joints up a bit faster. I cannot. How do I know that? Made many mistakes and gotten injured. Nothing catastrophic like you. I haven't had any joints operated on or anything like that, but do I have, aches and pains? Yeah, one of my knees I injured when I was 16 years old, not the greatest. I have to be careful of it. My shoulders, I busted both of my shoulders up squatting. And then secondarily, I would say bench pressing, squatting from really, really wedging underneath the bar. A lot of external rotation, traumatized the joints to the point, both of them, where I could not even bench the bar for a year each. So let's go through it again. Nutrition, sleep, meticulous attention to technique. And then I would say, the last one there, in technique, including warm-ups, would be the supplements. So the supplements that we take that are joint-specific supplements, and there's a lot of data behind this. We take, there's a whole sort of a synergistic group of them, as Ellis had alluded to. In addition to your whey protein, make sure you supplement with collagen protein. Okay, collagen protein powder is a big one. Hyaluronic acid. Okay, you can, it's the same stuff you put on your face. Okay, it augments, your collagen synthesis. You can buy it in pill form. Take that. You can take a variety of collagen complex pills, or you can again default to the, the collagen protein. Glucosamine and chondroitin with MSM is another big one. Proline and lysine, which are the building blocks of collagen from an amino acid level. All of those things, okay, and then your variety of anti-inflammatories, so whether it's turmeric, omega-3 fatty acids, whatever it happens to be, boswellia, okay, which is your willow bark, made from willow bark. These things are very, very, very important for joint integrity. You can't take enough of these things as you get older, and paying meticulous attention to all of those details is one of the reasons why I have not, at 53 years old, washed out in the sport, and I continue to get stronger. A lot of that, has to do with attention to technique, and really, really understanding what you're doing in the gym.
Love it. I want to highlight a couple of things. So we talked about, sleep, nutrition is kind of your big ones, technique. So in terms of all those things, and then obviously the supplements, I would kind of lump in kind of with what you're putting in your body with your food. I think number one, if you're listening to this and maybe you're just getting started, I don't know if you guys like track like MyFitnessPal, that sort of thing, but you need to take inventory of what you're putting in your body, how much you're sleeping, your sets and your reps. And like you said, a lot of people will like video for Instagram and stuff, but actually use video for like watch your form.
Sure. So do we. Thousands and thousands of videos, thousands. And I have a ton of logbooks. Ellis writes down every single thing that he does.
The logbook, I feel like it's a forgotten art. I have like old, I'm sure you have old notebooks and stuff from,
of course.
That's also kind of like, now I've moved over things kind of digitally for myself and our team, and I kind of get on my people. I'm like, listen, if you have time to post it on Instagram, you have time to write it in your logbook. You got time to write some notes. How did it feel? How did because I think people like you said, oh, I feel this little knee thing today. Make a note, because now if something does, hopefully not, something does go wrong, you can kind of backtrack. Okay, well, what happened? When did it start? What kind of program was I doing? What exercise? Maybe my knee was caving in a little bit that day. If you don't have that data, you really can't, like you said, troubleshoot and problem solve it as effectively. And then you kind of wonder when something happens, am I getting enough protein? Oh, I only slept 4 hours a night for the last 2 weeks, So take inventory of these things, because I think everyone knows, oh yeah, duh. But it's like, are you actually keeping track of these things? So I just want to kind of,
most people don't. The other thing that I would tell you, and this is the first time since I've been doing this with Kaler, the other thing that I would tell you, but Ellis does it and my other training partner does it as well. Actually, my 2 other training partners do it as well. Don't push buttons on this thing. Okay. In other words, write it down, because it ingrains it in your head. Okay. It's really, really important. There are a zillion apps out there. Okay. I've been doing it with Google Sheets. Okay. With Kaler, but I actually type in the numbers myself. In other words, write the numbers. I actually would prefer not doing that, but it's the way he does this remotely. I would tell people, write things down. It's like writing down your goals, and it etches it into your brain. And that's coming from a neurosurgeon. Okay. It's important to write things down. Okay. Literally write them. Don't just push a button for 5, 6, 7, or 8. Write these things down, which is why you have logbooks and I have a ton of logbooks. And the guy that I used to train, high intensity with, was friendly with Arthur Jones, we don't live too far from him. He was up in DeLand. So it was about a 2.5 hour ride. Logbooks, years. Okay. Going back into the 70s. Okay. This guy had his logbooks, everything written in pencil. There's something to be said about that.
Yeah. I think I don't know. And you may know this. I've heard when you're taking notes and stuff, like there's something about when you write it down, you remember it better too.
Of course.
I think there's, of course, you definitely make that some sort of neural connection when you do it. So, but again, it's like such a simple thing, but people don't do it. People are looking for this, so just, if you kind of master these basic things, take inventory of these basic things, and then just kind of, again, work out a little bit at a time. So, anything else in terms of the actual program, exercise selection, and frequency? Just only because I'm also a little bit interested myself, just because most people that I talk to don't kind of train this way anymore. So it's kind of, I'm always kind of interested to kind of pick your brain a little bit in terms of maybe specific exercises or accommodating resistance or accessory lifts that you found helpful for yourself, just in terms of either performance or staying healthy for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, Ellis, why don't you go ahead with that one? Because I actually learned something from Ellis. My goal obviously is to have, is to keep up with him as long as I possibly can. But obviously, what I really, really want, is for him to, surpass me, which he obviously will do, and quite soon. He's catching up very, 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 very quickly to my deadlift. I mean, we're talking within pounds. He's there. But he actually taught me something, or he actually brought it to my attention. Ellis, tell him, about the when I was talking to you about how you got your deadlift. So, because what happened with him, Coach, is that his deadlift, he was, not that he was stuck, but he was working. When he went off to college, it was, it was, maybe the low 4s or so. And then, I saw him, I would see him intermittently, and I would say, Jesus, the kid's getting strong, like fast. So right now his deadlift is mid fives to say the least, and he did that within a year. And I said, how the hell did you get that your deadlift up? So Ellis, tell him what you told me. What
Yeah,
exercise?
so I watched like a bunch of the West Side stuff, and I was like, these guys are just beating down on these good mornings. So I was like, all right, I'm just gonna implement a bunch of these.
So funny.
Yeah, and so I did like seated good mornings, banded good mornings, suspended good mornings, heavy. And over time, in addition, this is something weird that I think is still correlated to the increase in deadlift. I actually switched to hook grip for a little bit. And I would have to say, I think that builds I mean it's just like a new variation, right? Like it's the same philosophy as West Side itself. It just builds a robustness to like your quads, I think. And that's where I've been able to shine for deadlift. But in reality, it has just been the combination of like good mornings and then doing traps, which I'm still not the greatest at. But I think those are the key exercises that if you do them like religiously,
Just
you'll have.
curious, do you pull sumo?
Yeah.
Yes, we're both sumo pullers.
And then when you do, cool. And then when you do your good mornings, do you use like a similar stance or a closer stance or?
Mostly close. The seated ones I do have my feet like wide.
Very, very cool. So I think one
Yeah.
of the things I think that a lot of sumo pullers, and again, maybe your dad can comment, whatever. This is something that I've kind of noticed because I pull both ways, and I think that's an advantage.
How do you compete? Because we do both, but how do you compete?
I compete sumo. So my
How
best,
tall are you, if you don't mind me asking?
about 5'8". My best sumo pull in the gym is 700, and I've done 650 conventional, so I'm pretty balanced.
Yeah.
But I think which is there are some people that there's a big discrepancy, but what I have found,
Yeah.
I think in the off season, like building your lower back and the good mornings could be, so whether it's a conventional pull, a stiff legged, it's some of it's just kind of figuring out like what works for your body. But I think that the good mornings is kind of like one of those forgotten lifts, but building your lower back and hamstring stronger, really learning to hinge properly. Because there's obviously a lot of different ways you can do the good mornings. And I think a lot of people, they tend to like not do them strict enough, and they really can't like hold their lumbar in extension and really sit back, and then they kind of just fold over. So I mean, you could, and there's variations and stuff, but I think if people were able to get that lower back strength, and then when they go back to the sumo, which is a little bit like less lower back dominant, they're more upright, they're going to be able to hold their position that much better. Because I do think that a lot of people that only pull sumo and they don't train their lower back ever, they kind of get to this like kind of stealing where they kind of can't advance anymore. At least that's kind of what I've noticed with myself. I noticed that when my conventional deadlift kind of goes up, I could usually my sumo will kind of follow. So you guys may have found a similar thing, that your lower back got stronger and then you were able to kind of, increase your sumo potential. So really cool stuff. So always like to, hear some, success stories like that. That's really nice.
It's pretty interesting though. Like I just have to say, like this week we had a deload or like a rehabilitation thing. And I mean, I could pull like 500, like maybe an RP of like 7 or 8 sumo, but like a 5x5 for 315 conventional was pretty hard. Which is, I think I have the same.
Yeah, I think so. And I don't have that issue like we talked about, in other words, like Coach said, my sumo is probably within 25 or 50 pounds of my conventional.
Pretty balanced. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty balanced. And so, it's curious because, if I could ask a question, what do you think? So you think that Ellis is low back by virtue of the fact that his conventional?
I'd have to see it, but it's something I've noticed, and so like I've also seen like kind of kids his age that are very proficient at sumo. They don't like kind of, and this is no offense to you, they're very technical, but they don't like kind of look like they lift. They don't have like the erectors. They don't have the lats. They don't have. So like you mentioned that you're not really good at traps. That kind of makes me think that as you continue to get better at your good mornings and your rows and things like that, maybe some people like Pete Rubish really likes pull-ups, for example. I know Kaler, you mentioned Kaler. Kaler really loves doing heavy bent over rows.
Like I know he does.
Real heavy bent over rows.
Yeah.
And, and if you ever like, I don't know if you had a chance to meet him in person, but his back is like stupidly developed.
Just seeing videos. Yeah. Just talk to him on the phone.
I mean, and then you're like, oh, okay, that's why you deadlift 900 pounds. You know?
Right.
So it's like, it's not like by accident. So, but like, anyways, there's going to be a certain point where like, I see these younger kids, and I also see some of these younger kids are getting hurt because they're so like technical. They don't have like the structure to support the weight they're doing, and they don't do any of this accessory work. They only do. So I think it's good. You're actually doing, so anyways, it's just kind of a good conversation because there's pros and cons to all this stuff, but you have to kind of think about also long-term development. At a certain point, like you have to like build up the structure to support. If you want to get from a 500 to a 600 pound lift and then a 600 to a 700, you need the body to support that. Like your dad's saying, like you need to have the structural integrity. So your lats have to come up, your erectors need to come up, your hamstrings, your hips need to come up. But what I've kind of found is people are so like, they shy away from like training the lower back. They shy away there because they're just, okay, they're so good at sumo. People, then they throw the straps on, they throw the bumper plates, they go super wide. They're pulling it 1 inch. It's impressive, but their body's like not ready to like handle that kind of load. So anyways, and I also think that people will try to progress too quickly just because you can, doesn't mean you should. So I think, there's like a time and a place, and then there's the max out culture. I mean, you can kind of go on and on, but like, I think that having dedicated periods of time to like, and that's what's great about the conjugate system is that if you could figure out what your weak point is, you kind of attack your weak point. And now you have this whole new like unlocked potential. And that's like where these really specific programs, you get really good at the skill, which is, you still got to do that, but you also need to like find those weak points. So I thought that was really cool. I thank you for sharing that story, because I think it'll help a lot of people, even if maybe that specific example won't help them. A lot of times, once you could figure out like what that weak point is, you could like unlock like another, whole new level to your PR. So I think that's a really cool story.
Yeah, now Ellis, it's probably gotten me, just thinking about it, it's probably gotten me a lot stronger just doing those, I mean, and then I talked to Kaylor about, about integrating, some of those in. He had a little bit of it. He had a little bit of reverse hypers. He has some odd stuff that I've never done before, just like, weird sort of, for my shoulders, because he knows my shoulders stink, doing Arnold presses with, with dumbbells, working, as you had alluded to, Coach, working some of these smaller accessory muscles in order to give yourself the structural sort of integrity, get those joints really, really, really stabilized. And it's those little things oftentimes, that'll, push you up, significantly in weight. I mean, my deadlift, I can tell you, even though I just missed the 600 pound attempt a couple of weeks ago, and I compete in the 83 kilos. It's probably, Ellis, I would say it probably has gone up in this summer, probably 50 pounds, 50, just by virtue of, doing the good mornings, whether it's banded, whether it's these seated variations, doing some of these Bulgarian split squats, which Kaylor has me doing, which I really have never done. I'm not sure if you do those, Coach, but I mean, he's sort of a stickler with, with Bulgarian split squats, and I am horrendously weak. I don't know if it's a skill. I don't know if it's just, I haven't.
I know I just didn't mean to cut you off. I know you said that like your deadlift's your best lift, and then so is your squat, would you say, is more of like
yeah, I just compete in deadlift only now,
okay,
because my shoulders were so banged up. So I'm hoping to do full power again. I have, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but these last couple of meets have just been deadlift only, because I've just every time I gear up, and for the novice power lifters that are on here, the gear up, the phase where you are peaking is far worse than the meet. That's when you typically will get injured. So you have to be really, really meticulous. And every time I've tried to gear up in the past, for some sort of meet, I always get injured, and it's my fault. It's something that is technically unsound about my bench press. I have these long levers. So does Ellis. So does Kaylor. We all have long arms. So it's a little bit more difficult for us. That's not an excuse. It's just reality. It's just called mechanics. So my shoulders are weak. My external rotators are weak. And I have these long levers. So I end up getting a lot of trouble at the very, very bottom, obviously, that bottom inch or so. And I end up, causing myself problems, and then I can't bench for a year. So I've really been laying off for the past couple of years. as far as, competing full power, but I hope to get back in. But again, you know, how much is that going to cost me? If I get injured, trying to gear up for another one, that's probably going to be the end of that. And I'll just compete, deadlift only, until I can't compete anymore for whatever reason. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I want to touch on a couple of things. I want to talk about the deadlift only, and before that, though, I know you talked about so the Bulgarian split squat's another great example where it's just really kind of really isolating one side of the body. It's going to force you to use your legs. You can't really like cheat it, right? You have to so having those movements, I think a takeaway for people that are listening, yes, you need to get good at the competition lifts, but don't forget like the old school like bodybuilding stuff, the accessory stuff. And then Westside was very big on finding like specific accessory movements for like your weaknesses. So don't sleep on that small stuff. You talked about like your rotator cuff and doing like delt work, and all those little things will make a difference. It just, they may not be as exciting as pulling the 600 pounds, right? But those are the things that are going to keep you healthy and keep you strong. And I totally agree. And the other thing I wanted to highlight too, because there are a lot of people that think like, oh, if I can only do one lift, why bother? But I think single lift meets for someone like yourself, but even people that are just getting started, it's a great way to get your feet wet. You can still be competitive. I know for myself, I want to, I'm getting married next year, so I'm probably going to take, thank you. I'm going to take at least 1 year off full power. So I'll probably maybe just focus on maybe just deadlifting. Maybe I'll do a deadlift meet or whatever. But what it costs mentally and physically to do a full power meet, it's a big ordeal, especially if you want to really do it right. So there's nothing wrong with whether it be an orthopedic reason or just for time or whatever. I think it's totally fine to, don't be afraid to do a single lift meet. Don't be afraid to do a push pull. You don't have to, you're not required. And that's what's great about powerlifting is that there's options for people, so I loved what you said there. I think that's great. So I don't want to keep you guys. You guys are awesome. I could talk to you all day. I don't want to keep you too much longer. So we'll start to kind of wrap up here, but maybe we'll kind of go around again. We'll start with your son. If maybe it's someone that was starting out that's younger, like what advice would you give to somebody that's starting out in their strength journey? For someone,
Yeah, I think the first thing, and it's actually interesting that you say this because we have a guy who's a little bit he's older, great training partner, but he was completely novice to powerlifting in general. I think the number one tip is finding an experienced person, not relying on like you can read books and stuff, which I think are good supplements, but there's nothing like training with someone who has experience and has actual experience in terms of not has been in the space for 10 years and knows how to squat, and it's a mess, which is hard because you're like basically you need to validate that the person that you're looking to have as a mentor is good enough. But finding a good training partner is number one. And then, just sticking with it, right? Like, as you know, and my dad tells me this all the time, we go back and forth on, oh, should you be doing this? Should you be doing that? It all really works. Tried like a bunch of stuff at this point, and it's cool to see that regardless of what training style you implement, as long as you have some sort of accountability, which a training partner by nature enforces, you're going to be successful. And then just getting the basics down. It's not calculus to take all these supplements, but it is really important if you're going to do it to take it seriously and prioritize things like sleep and eating. So you're not going and eating McDonald's every day, as opposed to balanced meals where, we train in the mornings. There's a lot of timing that goes into it. But just, a cognizant awareness of, okay, I'm going to take this seriously. If I'm going to be a competitive powerlifter, it's going to require some sort of sacrifice, but it's obviously a really fun pursuit, and doing it with people that you know and love. Like this guy who his name is Ernest. He's this awesome guy. And he started with bodybuilding and now he's gone into powerlifting. He's now hooked from the competitive scene, but it took him a little bit to get in the seriousness and discipline for the training, because it requires you to say, okay, I know I just had a RPE of 9.5 on this deadlift, and I know I can do a 10, but it's going to screw him up for the rest of the month. And his, training cycle is now impoverished, right? I think the seriousness of and the maturity is something that it enforces for younger guys like me. So I think I'm, super happy to have been involved in it and continue doing it and teach other people.
Awesome. And same question for you.
Yeah, I mean, as Ellis had said, a meticulous, attention, to your technique, be disciplined, stick to it. As he had said, and this is 100% correct, everything works for some ill-defined period of time, okay, for everyone. All right. So if it happens to be powerlifting, you know, foundations and understanding are first sleep, nutrition, recovery. Don't overtrain. Leave your ego at the door. Okay. Just forget about, keeping up with the Joneses. Okay. Move at your own pace, log everything, set goals, meet the goals. Okay. Understand that your body is going to adapt. We are adaptive organisms. Okay. And it will adapt for sure. Okay. Albeit slowly. Okay. It's just, the said specific adaptations to imposed demands, the said principle. Okay. It's going to work. Okay. This is what Ellis and I talk about all the time. You can't rush. Okay. You go slowly. Don't compromise your technique. Find somebody who's got no hair on his head. Okay. To teach you. Okay. Don't learn on YouTube. Okay. Forget about posting on Instagram. Shoot videos for yourself. Okay. And be hypercritical and hyper vigilant about your form and your technique, and get other opinions from experienced people. Those are sort of just basic things that we teach anybody, and we've had plenty of them. Anybody who comes to join us and powerlift with us, and those are the basic principles that we've instilled in Ellis, and it has borne significant fruit. But when it comes to barefooting, and also when it comes to the competitive stage of powerlifting. So he just set a Florida state record this past 2 weekends ago. So he's doing real well. And you keep in mind that you can take it with you, as Ellis had said. You could teach your kids, right? And it's something, as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing that's more important than being able to have your health and investing in your health and spreading that message. So this is what powerlifting does, right?
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate your time. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's like, I think sometimes, like, when people maybe listen to messages like this, it's like, oh, we're all serious and stuff, and you could have fun, but it is your body. So, like, take care of it. We want to do this for a long time. So if this is fun, let's do it like in the most optimal way that's going to be the healthiest for you, and do it for a really long time. You don't want to be a flash in the pan. I mean, at least I don't. If that's my goals. I want to do this as long as I can. Right. And I want to reap the benefits from it. So I really appreciate it. You guys were awesome. I don't know if you guys, it's up to you or not, if you want to plug anything, or if you have a website before we close out.
Ellis is wearing our shirt.
Yeah, Senolytics.
There you go.
Yeah, which means, age sort of destroying, if you will. Seno, age, like senile. Okay. Lytics, which means to lyse, which means to destroy. So it's an age thwarting protocol in here. And obviously one of the integral principles or foundations of it is heavy strength training. And whether it happens to be high intensity training, which can be quite heavy, or powerlifting, we like powerlifting. It's something that is integral to your health, and you cannot have your optimal health without amassing, and maintaining, that muscle mass on your body. It's where your resilience is. It's from a functional standpoint, it's where it's at, and it keeps you healthy and free of disease. And I see that in the trauma center all the time. The people that come in there, just as an aside, the people that come in there and they're sarcopenic, so they're devoid of muscle. Those are the ones that, in the context of a trauma or in the wake of a trauma, those are the ones that die. The ones that have got something to them, there's a little bit of stock to them, males and females. Okay. Those are the ones that live. So you want to keep that muscle on your body. And that's why it's so important, for my clinic patients, to strength train, and everybody.
Mark Smelly Bello, he says strength is never a weakness, right? So keep that muscle on you.
I like that. I've never heard that.
I love, yeah. We're, ask Keller about him. He spent a lot of time with Mark, and they're not as involved with powerlifting anymore, but they're real good people. So all the guys at Slingshot. So really see you guys listening. If you guys enjoyed the podcast, please share it. Please give it a 5-star.
Absolutely.
Thank you
Absolutely.
guys so much for listening. Until next time, stay strong, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks so much.